Hello and welcome back to the second day of the Sea Grant Marine Debris Symposium. My name is Madison Willard and I'm a CNAPS Fellow in the National Sea Grant Office. Just a couple symposium reminders before we get into it. Speakers, if you could please keep your video and microphones off until it is your turn to present so that we can all focus on the presentations, that would be great. As a reminder, these talks will be recorded and shared publicly. And talks are 10 minutes with 5 minutes for questions. And anyone is welcome to ask questions using the chat feature in GoToWebinar. So we had some really great talks yesterday. Looking forward to some more great talks today. Today we're focusing entirely on our Community Action Coalition competition projects. And the first talk is called Fish Finders for Stewardship, training volunteers to use side scan sonar to find and remove derelict crab pots from Delaware's recreational blue crab fishery with Brittany Haywood. So Brittany, go right ahead.
Thank you. All right, so hi guys, my name is Brittany Haywood. I work for Delaware Sea Grant, housed within the University of Delaware, and I'm the coastal ecology specialist here. And as mentioned, I'm going to be chatting with you about training volunteers to use side scan sonar to find derelict or lost crab pots in Delaware's inland bays, which is a recreational fishery. Next slide, please. So first of all, where are we? Well, here's the state of Delaware, and the inland bays, our focus area is in the southeastern portion of Delaware, and it's relatively shallow. It's about 1 to 2.5 meters across, and it's pretty protected from high winds and currents, which make it a good location for trying to use volunteers to help remove some of these pots because it's fairly accessible. And then the other thing about this area, again, it is a recreational fishery only. So there's no commercial fishermen out there to be able to utilize to try and help solve the problem of these derelict crab pots. Well, what is the actual problem here? Next slide, please. Since around 2019, approximately 1,500 acres of the inland bays have been mapped for derelict crab pots. What you're looking at here in the top screen is a very northern portion of the inland bays. It's just a piece of it, and each little orange path is a boat pass, and then the the red rectangles are pots that have been identified. So out of those 1,500 acres that have been mapped, approximately 1,800 pots have been found. And so that averages about 1.6 pots per acre. So we have a lot of derelict or lost pots in the inland bays in an area, especially that is just recreational only. And there's a couple different pathways that the state has for addressing the issue. One is with the Delaware Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Control. Their enforcement division has a group of folks that go out and inspect these pots, the abandoned pots, and if they've been left out for more than 72 hours, they will pull them up to try and prevent them from becoming lost. And then our program, Sea Grant, in conjunction with some other entities at University of Delaware, since 2020 have hosted individual roundup removal events to remove these pots. And over the course of these events, there has been, I think, around 62 different folks who have, or 62 individuals who have helped across the years to try and figure out how to best remove pots in these areas. Next slide, please. So in working with those volunteers, they're either community members or they're different nonprofit agencies, folks from the university, state agencies. We all come together to do these removal events on a small scale. But in talking with them and with the community members, their primary concerns are related to ghost fishing. So these pots keep fishing all these different animals and they're not actually being fished or harvested. And then, of course, damage to boats. So again, recreational area, huge tourist area. There are lots of boats coming through, going around, and either damage to boats from these pots, or the pots causing damage to, or the boats causing damage to the pots, causing them to become lost. And the most resounding thing I've heard from folks so far is that they want to help, they just don't know how. Um, so that's something we're looking to tap into to try and address the issue. And this image here are just different images of pots on a side scan sonar. Next slide, please. So historically, our Roundup process has involved 3 different steps, essentially, or 3 different groups that work together and are coordinated. The first is using University of Delaware vessels to go out and find the pots with the side scan sonar. So it's usually up to 3 vessels, not every year uses 3, that go out and tag them with a buoy. And then next slide, please. The volunteers are recruited and they go out and find the pots that have been tagged and haul them up, have a very dirty business of hauling them up and bringing them to shore, which next slide, please. And we have a shore crew, which is usually state agencies or nonprofits and some volunteers intertwined that help get the pots off the boats, clean them, weigh them for data recording, and determining whether they can be kept and refurbished or if they need to be recycled or trash. So in this process, our limiting factor is going out and finding and tagging the pots. And there's plenty to find, but the volunteers that have been doing this for a few years have gotten really good at hauling them up, and they tend to go faster than the sonar boats can find. So with our new efforts, we're trying to address that. Next slide, please. So moving forward, our goals are to recruit, train, and incentivize volunteers and partners to use the sonars. So educate them on how to use it, how to set it up in order to help in locating and removing the pots. So you're not stuck with boats waiting behind the sonar boat to pick them up. They can find them and pick them up on their own. And still looking to continue to remove those crab pots. But the other piece of this grant that we received is education. So education not only on the recreational crabber front on how they can prevent their pot from being lost, but also on the recreational boater front on how they can avoid causing issues with lost pots or having rope wrapped around their prop or whatnot. So we have this plan to train. Next slide, please. And the training component involves a couple different pieces. It's a combination of in-person workshops and web-based video trainings that will cover how to install temporary transducers, how to set up side imaging fish finders or sonars, and identifying those crab pots on the sonar, and then the best removal methods and tools. And that's all well and good, you say, but what happens when the people don't have it? Next slide. So the other piece of what we're planning and currently working on setting up is a sonar library. So this will be a set of modules and transducer mounts that can be adapted to different boat sizes that folks can essentially check out to help use at these events to make them more accessible to folks on different fronts. Next slide, please. And then our next Roundup event we're hosting is actually in a few weeks at the end of the month. And we'll be looking to get some good footage for our training videos during this event and get some more pots out at the same time. So dual purpose in that front. So we're excited to see that event go forward. Next slide, please. And So I mentioned the outreach component. So two things, two main areas we're targeting again are the crabbers, the recreational crabbers. And one way we're going to help work with them is hold workshops in different communities in Delaware to help these folks make sure that their pots are rigged correctly. So making sure they have bycatch reduction devices, call rings, they have the proper buoy floats tied correctly so that reduces the risk of them being lost. And again, we do that in person. And sometimes if we have pots from the Roundup events that have been deemed fishable, still fishable, we'll take them to these events and re-rig them and use them as giveaways. And then also in-person events, educational exhibits just at local events and things like that, trying to target the boater side to educate them on the issue at hand and how they can help reduce the likelihood of these pots being introduced. And also getting kids and families involved with activities like the picture on the top right of making a little crab headband there. So all trying to get all different age levels, start young, start them young, and get them all the way through. Next slide, please. So that is kind of the summary of the project, and this is a summary of it, Seuss style. I apologize, I've been reading lots of Dr. Seuss books lately, so it's summarized Seuss style. But the project team consists of myself. I handle most of the coordinating front, and then Dr. Art Hermanis and his lab are the sonar side and have helped assist with that. So I think there's one more slide maybe, and that's all I got.
Awesome. Thank you, Brittany. That was great. We have a couple questions for you. Have you shared your past experience and lessons learned with other regions who work in similar fields?
So I will preface this with I started in this position in May and I took this project over from someone else, but I do know there has been conversations with other folks, especially in the Mid-Atlantic region, as to how things have gone on and trying to adapt and figure out how best to target our region with other folks who have more experience on ours. So to some degree, yes, but hopefully more in the future.
That's great. And hopefully the symposium will help with that too. What is the primary demographic you're pulling from for the new volunteers, and has the amount of technical information and technology used been a barrier in recruitment?
I think the biggest barrier to recruitment has been the need for boats, people wanting to use their own personal boats or willing to use their own personal boats in this effort because it's the area we're working in is extremely muddy and a lot of these pots are just not pretty. So the demographic really for this region is of the older generation, most retirees it's retiree and tourism is huge in this area. So that's kind of who we're working with and why we're trying to target both the events on the recreational boater side, because those are going to be more seasonal type folks who coming in and out and you can hit there. And then the folks who have second homes here are not working with HOAs and different communities, community leaders to try and get into those communities and help spread the word about the problem and need for volunteers, along with other nonprofit organizations in their area too.
Awesome, thanks. One last question. What depths are you operating at, and what is the substrate type? I think you just mentioned it's muddy, but the question asker wants to know, do you think this sonar technology would work in areas with higher rugosity or complex bottom types like coral reefs?
I am not the person to ask for that. Art would be the person to ask, but his contact information is on the screen. So I'm going to punt that question over to him if you need to answer it.
Awesome. Thank you, Brittany. That was really, really wonderful. All right, we can move on to our next talk, which is the Low Country Network, building a coalition of community members, shrimpers, educators, and conservationists to remove and recycle marine debris. Brooke, go ahead.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. My name is Brooke Sari, and I'm with the South Carolina Sea Grant Consortium. I'll be presenting today on behalf of all the partners on this project. These partners, in addition to ourselves, include University of Georgia Marine Extension and Georgia Sea Grant, as well as the Gullah Geechee Cultural Heritage Corridor. Next slide. This project expands upon the Trawl to Trash program started as a pilot by UGA Marine Extension and Georgia Sea Grant, then partnered with us, South Carolina Sea Grant Consortium, in 2021 to bring together commercial fishermen, coastal residents, and K-12 students to reduce marine debris littering in Georgia and South Carolina beaches and estuaries. There are two parts to this program. Working with commercial shrimpers to pay them to create upcycled stow bags with old trawl nets, and then engagement outreach efforts associated with the utilization of these bags and the larger marine debris prevention education. This industry in particular faces several challenges related to sustaining the industry and livelihoods. As of January 2022, 15 commercial shrimpers from Georgia and South Carolina have received roughly $30,000 in support for sewing 1,500 bags. This will be expanded over the duration of the current project, and we will have 2,000 more bags constructed and provided roughly $40,000 in off-season revenue for commercial shrimpers in Georgia and South Carolina. Next slide. Continued expansion is ongoing along with various unofficial efforts with other Sea Grant programs. This expansion of the Trawl to Trash program into the Low Country Network will focus on building capacity within community organizations and expanding outreach efforts to increase public knowledge, awareness, and action on marine debris issues. As part of the project, South Carolina and Georgia Sea Grant programs partnered with the Gullah Geechee Cultural Heritage Corridor to offer place-based internship opportunities to students from diverse and underserved communities. South Carolina Sea Grant will be building out a fully fledged outreach program, and Georgia will be expanding their successful engagement efforts, all as part of this current project. I will now go into a quick overview of what has been done and planned for year one of this project. Next slide. The project team is actively working with commercial shrimpers to create trawl to trash bags made of recycled shrimp net material. Current efforts include expanding into new areas, delivering materials, and setting up timelines in relation to outreach efforts. Project plans include construction of 800 bags in year one, with shrimpers being paid $20 per bag that they make. We currently have 22 shrimpers participating or in the process of coming on board to participate in this project. Next slide. This past summer, we hired, I will do a brief overview of efforts going underway by each project partner. South Carolina Sea Grant Consortium has been working on getting front-facing engagement materials created that will aid in engagement efforts. These include project website, rack card, and shrimper support material. Each of the project partners are listed on the slides so that you can see which ones of us are involved in each of these efforts. Next slide. This past summer, we hired our first project community education intern as part of this project, Enzo Marcello. As part of improving on previous efforts, we developed a video tutorial to streamline the bag making process. Enzo worked with creating content for web page and conceptualization, filmed and voiced our stow bag instruction video for shrimpers. Through this project, Enzo was able to learn various aspects of communicating science, including working with stakeholders and conceptualizing communication projects and products, such as creating a video storyboard to create the shrimper engagement video. Next slide. We have multiple outreach events planned as part of this project. A location-focused marine debris and habitat protection event called Maritime Days, various cleanup events leveraging existing efforts, and kicking off a new boat-based cleanup called Debris Derbies. We will also continue our student engagement with the hiring of another summer CEI intern that will work with the project team and project graduate student. Next slide. Now I'll discuss the UGA Marine Extension and Georgia Sea Grant efforts. Next slide. Georgia Sea Grant plans to expand their efforts and continue expansion of partners. Workshops focused on adult learners are planned for both virtual and in person, focusing on marine debris issues and stow bag construction. Youth education and workforce development are focuses of these efforts. In addition, we will be partnering together on many of the outreach events that are planned throughout the course of the project. Next slide. The Gullah Geechee Cultural Heritage Corridor efforts will be led by the Executive Director, Victoria Smalls. While extending into both Florida and North Carolina, this national heritage area encompasses 100% of the coast of South Carolina and 100% of the coast of Georgia, an important maritime cultural area that ties our two states together. Project partners will work with the corridor on the design and implementation of a graduate internship program to weave marine debris education programming into ongoing environmental stewardship activities. In addition, we will be working together to incorporate Gullah Geechee maritime cultural heritage and local ecological knowledge into outreach efforts, such as Maritime Days, as previously discussed. Next slide. Many of our engagement efforts will be combined between all the partners. One example is National Ocean Month, a social campaign that will cross-promote between all the partners, and the project team will work together on content and logistical development. Each project team is in a different stage of implementation of their trawler trash efforts, but together as a coalition, marine debris prevention and education will be expanded through our efforts. And together we will be able to provide outreach and engagement that supports this coalition and marine debris prevention and education. Next slide. And so I want to thank you very much for listening, and we're very excited to be kicking off this project. Our respective project websites are listed, and we also have a joint social media tag that is on all of the tags that are attached to the bags. And hopefully, as the project progresses, we will build our social media presence for this project, and a lot of our engagement efforts will be front-facing through those efforts. Thank you.
Thanks, Brooke. That was so wonderful to hear about. Anyone who has questions for Brooke, please put them in the chat. In the meantime, I have a question. Yes. What has been your favorite part so far of working on this project?
Well, I guess I have two answers for that. So with the startup of this project, and the reason we really wanted to continue this effort was the engagement with the shrimpers and the people. We started small, and we have a pilot eco-based tourism company that is working with us on utilizing the bags as we build our outreach piece in South Carolina, and their excitement of incorporating those bags within the programs they have on their tours and their nature-based type various programs and projects has been really neat to see. And then the shrimpers that participated in the first project really enjoyed making these bags and being able to be a part of the program. And there's a lot of joint excitement for moving forward. So we really wanted to continue those efforts and wanted to focus in on building a really great education program around these bags.
Thank you. All right, we have another question that came in. What was the best practice in reaching the commercial fishermen and engaging them?
So I can't speak for how Georgia did it, because our programs are set up differently and how we engage with shrimpers. And so I don't know the nuances of theirs. However, in South Carolina, we were starting from scratch. And so the way we did that is we actually worked with our marine life specialist and our fisheries program, who have already developed these relationships and partnerships. And so we rely on those that are working in those fields and have those connections. And so we partner together and collaborate based on everyone's strengths and networks to be able to make those connections and figure out who would like to be part of the program and work through using our coworker partnerships.
Thanks, Brooke. I'll ask another question. What has surprised you the most in this process?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that is yet to come, because we are really going to start getting into some really solid efforts. And so for South Carolina, I think that we haven't gotten far enough into the outreach side to be able to answer that yet. However, I will say Georgia has, and a lot of the efforts, support, and impacts that they have made, especially with the K through 12 group, has been very inspiring. And so being able to be part of a project that expands upon that impact and expands that impact across the states, I think is going to be really fun and will be one of those hopeful surprises to see how that takes place.
Awesome. Well, Brooke, thank you so much. This has been so great to hear about this important work.
Thank you so much.
All right, we can move right ahead to Cape Cod Coalition to Shift Tourism Businesses to Sustainable Serviceware with Jill. Jill, are you on the line?
Here.
Perfect.
I wasn't sure if I needed to turn on my camera if you did that. So, hi,
Go
everyone.
right ahead.
Great to be here. We're so excited. This is our first NOAA grant, so we couldn't be more excited and grateful. I also appreciate the opportunity to collaborate with Stephanie Murphy from the Hui Sea grant, and we worked with her previously on a cooperative or on a serviceware guide, a compostable serviceware guide. And so this gives us another opportunity to work with her and her team. And I also wanted to just acknowledge that Adam Gracia, who joined us in July as our deputy director, he's actually going to be leading this. He's on the call, but he was busy out recruiting volunteers today. So I gave him the opportunity to sit back and relax and agree to do this presentation. So this, and by the way, I'm Jill Talladay. I'm the founder and director of CARE for the Cape and Islands. So this grant actually has given us, it's really building on a summit that we started hosting 5 years ago. And it's bringing people together to work collaboratively on plastic pollution and litter issues. And our summits have been held in collaboration with the Center for Coastal Studies and Cape Cod Anti-Litter Coalition. Next slide, please. So in 2018, we decided that we had done a number of programs with the Center for Coastal Studies related to marine debris. And we put our heads together and we thought, you know, there are so many like-minded organizations that are doing similar work. Wouldn't it be great to bring them all together in the same room? And we felt that we would see a greater impact if we all worked collaboratively together. So we invited nonprofits, municipalities, businesses to come together and developed working groups at the first summit that were created based on the priorities that were identified by the attendees. So they connect directly to this project priorities, which are waste reduction and prevention, working collaboratively through partnerships and solution-based efforts. And the timing for this grant couldn't be more right on, because there are some towns that have recently passed bylaws that are preventing the use of single-use takeout containers and serviceware. So it's fitting that we are able to help work together within the industry to provide some solutions. And we've seen such, which I think in a lot of other regions have seen it with the the proliferation of single-use plastic as a result of the pandemic, and so many of our businesses just never went back to using reusable. So we see a great need for what we're doing. And we see some support from our state as well. Recently, our Massachusetts governor created an executive order banning the use of single-use plastic bottles by state agencies. So it's just kind of reinforcing and knowing that there is a focus and a need to reduce single-use plastic that ends up as marine debris. We've also done a lot of solution-based work in our history. We funded a number of water bottle refill stations around the region, cigarette butt collectors, and signage, and we brought a really fun messaging campaign called Take Care Cape Cod to the region that is encouraging people to do the right thing. This grant is really seeking to address the problem of single-use plastic used by tourism-based and hospitality businesses. So not only restaurants, but we're also going to be working and reaching out to waterfront vendors, ferry boats, charter boats, and ocean-based operators on Cape Cod that contribute to marine debris, especially during our heavy tourism season. Next slide, please. So we have 3 objectives that we're focused on, really building on and strengthening our existing partnerships, expanding our network to involve all 15 towns in the region, and really kind of expanding the stakeholders that are participating. The objective establishes a cohesive, energized, and effective coalition of committed partners. We're focused a lot on education. We realize that we want to enhance the community literacy about single-use plastics and the impact on marine environment, and really motivate behavior change by educating, creating a shared responsibility. So many of our businesses are so focused on just getting the job done, and they just oftentimes don't lift their head up and don't even seem to recognize that what they're doing or what they're using is creating a problem, and if it's not corrected, it's going to really impact their business in the future. So we really want to also develop capacity and capability to enable businesses to shift to reusable, more sustainable alternatives, and like I said, in considering reusables, which they may not have even thought about, and expanding commercial composting opportunities, because if they're not using reusable and we're encouraging businesses to use compostable, there needs to be a place for our facility to handle that. So much of our compostable products are being hauled off Cape to a different part of the state, or they're being incinerated. Next slide, please. So we wanted to collect some data as a baseline and determine a starting point to learn what businesses, where they are, what are their needs, and what do they perceive as the barriers to bring various stakeholders together, to introduce them to the concept and meet each other through our summits and through quarterly meetings, and to really begin the outreach to build that coalition and expand our current network. Next slide, please. So the first thing that we did was we actually we conducted a survey. We wanted to, as I said, get kind of a baseline, and so we were able to share this survey through our local chambers of commerce. We have a regional chamber of commerce in 15 towns, so all of them shared the survey with their members. We sent it out through our own contacts, and shared it also on social media. Next slide, please. So what we learned, well, some of the things that we asked first is, what are the current, what are they currently using, and are they composting? What do they perceive as barriers? And also we wanted to know whether they would be willing to get involved in our work. So what we found was that the data really shows that there's a true lack of awareness and knowledge about sustainable serviceware. They have are so confused by what to buy, where do they buy it, are there available resources that we do have a commercial composting, a hauler, that many of the businesses didn't even know that existed. And there are misconceptions about the cost of products and product quality, and then many of them, as I said earlier, I mean, they're so focused on their business, surprisingly, they don't recognize or they're not aware that they really need to change, that it's going to impact our future if they don't think about it and do something. Next slide, please. So one of the ways that we're going to be sharing this information is through and getting engagement is through our summits. Next week, we're holding our 5th annual summit, and this year is focused specifically on the grant, and it's titled the Rising Tide of Plastic Pollution, and working on providing solutions at the summit. Next slide, please. So we have a really meaty and exciting program, we think. There's a group in the town of Falmouth that instead, when they were presented with a bylaw by a petitioner, they decided that they didn't want to just pass this bylaw. They recognized that there was a need, but they wanted to make sure that it was something that really was beneficial for their town. So they developed this committee to research it and to get engagement from the community. And so they'll be sharing the process that they have gone through and kind of what they've learned and where they are. We've invited some local organizations to come and that are already doing some really good things, who can share from a firsthand experience, what have they learned, what are the challenges, and help educate the attendees. And then we really wanted to provide some resources because, again, we feel that they don't really know what to do, where to go, how to get funding. And so we've got some really good presenters who are going to be providing some of that information, and recognizing that we don't have all the answers, but we want to at least get the conversation started. And then we've got a networking lunch that will start building the coalition, where they'll work in groups and get to know each other and find out from them, again, what some of the needs are. So we'll provide an open dialogue around the issues that we're and cultivate ownership in impacted constituent base. Next slide, please. So as part of the outreach, we've identified and we've connected with a number of organizations. It's really exciting to learn and meet some of these organizations that exist and find out what they're doing, and to be able to bring them in. So a number of these businesses and organizations that you see here are actually going to be some of the presenters at our summit. So we're excited about that, and continuing to build our coalition, build our resources, and work together. Next slide. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. I'd happily answer any questions if there are any.
Thanks, Jill. Such important and interesting work. You have a question. Could you provide some additional detail on whether you've been able to connect with other organizations doing similar work, or take advantage of existing programs or materials like Clean Water Fund's Rethink Disposable?
Yes, so Rethink Disposable is one of the organizations that is going to be, Amber's going to be presenting at the summit next week. We had a conversation with Recyclable. They aren't available to attend, but these are some organizations that we would like to invite to our quarterly meeting. So yes, we're we're beginning to outreach and like I said, it's really exciting to meet all these organizations and find the resources that we're going to need.
Awesome. What would you say has been your biggest challenge so far?
Oh, I think because we're dealing with food-based businesses, restaurants, it's like, how do you get them? How do you connect with them, because they're so busy, and so we've got some good attendance coming next week, but we're like, where are the restaurants? Where are the food service businesses that we're trying to get to? So that's been the challenge, and but we're going to reach out to them directly one-on-one and see, you know, how do we make this work? Because I know when we did go door to door and share the information, especially in one of the towns that has the bylaw coming up, when I explained that we were there to help provide solutions to them, they were so grateful. So it's just a matter of connecting with them and figuring out, you know, how and when to do that.
Great. Another question says, thanks so much for your work on this. What do you see are some of the key misconceptions on cost?
Well, I think we're beginning to research the cost differential and work with some of the vendors, but I think that it's just this thing in their head that they think it's so much more expensive to use compostables. But again, ultimately, we really want to shift organizations to using reusable, and that's one of the things that Rethink Disposable, you know, has been doing really well. So they do this cost analysis and audit, and so we're looking forward to working with them to bring in the audit to show that it's really going to save the business money if they move to reusable instead of the disposables.
Thanks. And on a similar note, have you found market availability of sustainable serviceware is feasible for restaurants and other tourist businesses to afford at this point? You sort of answered that, but if you could expand at all.
Yeah, I mean, because we've got a program that did a pilot this past season on Martha's Vineyard. So Island Eats, I always say it wrong, Island Eats MV. And so they're also a presenter. And I think that probably the biggest challenge with that is it's finding the who's going to wash it. How is it, you know, businesses don't want you to bring a dirty container back to them, you know, so that seems to be the biggest challenge with the reusables, but I think it is doable. And I think it's a great business opportunity, you know, so, and we think of it kind of like, if you think of it kind of like a laundry service, you know, there's a lot of this. So you've got the outside and they just deliver it like they do linens and so on. So it's just getting businesses to think about that. Like they don't understand it, which is why they need to hear more.
For sure. All right. Thank you, Jill. Thank you for your talk. Thank you for answering all those questions. We can move right along to our next talk, which is raising awareness of marine pollution in underserved populations. Maurice, there you are. Go ahead,
Hey,
Maurice.
how you doing, Madison?
Good.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And what I would like to do this afternoon is share with you our project, Raising Awareness of Marine Pollution in Underserved Populations. The PI on the project is Frederica Mosier from Maryland Sea Grant, and then we have colleagues at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore, Dr. Maggie Sexton and Joy Riceley from Hampton University on the project. My role in the project is I serve as the manager of the effort. So I will be leading you through what we're trying to do with this project. Our title, Raising Awareness of Marine Pollution in Underserved Populations, also has the very nice acronym of RAMP UP. Can we go to the next slide, please? And this is our overall goal here is to educate minority youth about environmental degradation, how it connects with environmental justice, and actions that the students can take. And I want to spend a little bit of time talking with you what I mean by environmental degradation and also what I mean by that term, environmental justice. Next slide, please. So the there we go. Thank you. The environmental degradation we're talking about is marine debris. And here I have NOAA's definition of marine debris, which is encompassing a wide variety of different types of materials. Everything from abandoned boats to lost or derelict fishing gear to trash floating in the water, all the way down to those little bits and pieces of microplastics and nanoplastics that are floating in the water, and how these materials can have a negative effect upon the environment and even upon our health. Next slide, please. The second term I wanted to go over was environmental justice. And here I'm sharing with you the definition given by the Environmental Protection Agency. If you recall, way back when, sometime during your history classes or your civics classes, you may have learned how all these different environmental regulations and laws that the federal government has have to apply equally to all citizens within the nation. And when we look at environmental laws, unfortunately, we find that a lot of them they have disproportionate effects on different populations in our country. So for example, when we look at hazardous waste facilities and where they're located, they're oftentimes located in neighborhoods with predominantly minority groups or poor people are living. Next slide, please. Another effect that's going on is we have historical practices that are no longer ongoing currently, but these historical practices have had effect on our current environment. And here I'm giving an example of redlining, which was a practice where they would rank the riskiness of a home loan or credit worthiness of different neighborhoods in the city. Here, the ranking is from green, which was, very good, safe to give a loan, all the way down to D, which is the red area, very risky, don't give a loan to those areas. And what happens is that those areas that are rated D, those neighborhoods were predominantly minority groups. So they're prevented from getting access to loans and other financial services. And this particular graph we're looking at is a study that looks at those red line neighborhoods and overlays it with afternoon temperatures in the city of Richmond. And what they found was a really strong correlation between where those red line neighborhoods historically are and where Black neighborhoods continue to be located, and very much warmer temperatures in the afternoon. And this is important, of course, because of global climate change and how we can expect to find more extreme heat events occurring as we go into the future. So this is an example of a practice that reverberates even in today's environment, a racist practice that its effects are being felt today. Now, the environmental justice movement sort of born out of the response to these practices, and it's a melding of social justice with environmentalism. Next slide, please. So what Ramp Up is going to do is we are going to enhance community literacy about marine debris. And we're going to do this in two different ways. We're using a formal education approach, and secondly, an informal education approach. In both ways, we're going to teach minority youth about marine debris issues. We're going to connect that with environmental justice and then discuss actions that the students can take. So the first one I want to spend a little bit of time talking about is the formal education aspect. Next slide, please. So our formal education efforts center around the development of modules around marine debris. And over here on the right-hand side of the screen, I have a list of some of the modules we'll be developing. A module is a set of material that includes things like lecture notes, reading assignments for the students, homework assignments, and ways to assess what the students have learned. So that's what I mean by the term module. And the plan is for our partners at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore and Hampton University, faculty there will be creating these modules around marine debris and use them in the courses that they teach. So for example, at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore, Dr. Maggie Sexton, she teaches a class in marine zoology. It happens to be an online class. So she'll be creating modules around marine debris that she'll be using in that particular class. And a similar thing will be taking place at Hampton University. Both of these universities are historically Black colleges, so they have a large population of African American students in attendance in the respective institutions. Next slide, please. The second approach we're using is informal education. And here what I've done is I've identified different organizations that have summer programs for youth. And the four that we're currently working with are City of Annapolis Recreation Parks, Minorities in Agriculture, Talbot County Mentors, and the Virginia Aquarium. And I approached each of these guys when I was putting the grant together. And the plan is during the course of the summer, when they have their program ongoing, I will go to that particular program. I'll work with the students for a couple number of visits and do activities around marine debris. So that's how we're going to get into the youth through these informal education approach. This next slide, please. This here is an example of a summer program that I developed in conjunction with one of our partners, Contavious Jones at Talbot County Mentors in Easton, Maryland. And the plan is to visit with them 5 visits, 1 visit a week for over a period of 5 weeks. On my first visit, we'll be talking about marine debris. I'll give a general introduction of marine debris. And then we'll have the students do a litter survey in the immediate neighborhood. On the second visit, we'll take them to an outdoor education center. In this case, it'd be the Pickering Creek Audubon Center, which is not too far away from Easton. And there what we'll do is we'll repeat the litter survey. So now we have 2 different data sets that the students can compare what they're finding, and they can ask questions, well, why are the amount of litter we're seeing in these 2 different places different? And while they're there, we'll spend some time, collecting organisms, the water, and learning about connections between land and connections between the land and the water. Where does a piece of trash go when it lands on the parking lot? It gets moved from the parking lot into a ditch, into a creek, into the Chesapeake Bay, and then eventually out into the ocean. So those are the kind of connections we want them to make. On the third visit, we'll visit the Horn Point labs, and we'll go to the labs of Dr. Elizabeth North. She studies microplastics, and she's agreed we'll set up some scopes for the students to look at microplastics, and they'll be able to see the microplastics and learn about how those plastics can impact the environment. And then our fourth visit, we'll visit the Water's Edge Museum in Oxford, Maryland. And at that particular museum, they have an exhibit on environmental justice. So we'll learn a little bit more about what's going on with that environmental justice topic. And then on our last visit, we'll talk about actions we can take, and they'll get another very short assessment so I can get an understanding of what they actually picked up from our time together. So that's an example of an effort we're going to do in terms of our informal education. Next slide, please. Now, over this past summer, I was able to meet with several students who were in a program at Annapolis Recreation and Parks. I was only able to meet with them 3 times, But the first visit, we were able to do a litter survey and talk about marine debris. We were able to visit the Pickering Creek Outdoor Education Center, did a walk through the woods, and students were able to repeat the litter survey and see the differences, the amount of litter we're seeing between the neighborhood we were in Annapolis and the Pickering Creek area. And on the third visit, we actually went over to a recycling center. So at Capitol Heights, Maryland, the county of Prince George's has a very large recycling center that handles most of the recycling in the county. It comes into that area, it gets sorted and then baled up and then sold out to different buyers. So the students and I spent an afternoon, about 2 hours visiting that particular recycling center. So they got a very in-depth look at what happens to the recycling stuff that they put into that bin outside their front door. Next slide, please. So in terms of our ongoing efforts, some of the things that we are going to accomplish before the holidays arrive is I've been working on developing the environmental justice module. My colleagues at Hampton University are putting together a pamphlet on reduction, reuse, and recycling of plastics. And I'm also working on expanding the summer program partnerships to include other folks out there in the community. And that's all I have for this afternoon. If you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them.
Thanks, Maurice. That was awesome. Here's a question. Someone wrote in and said, this sounds like a really impactful project. One question I have is regarding the formal education component. Will there be any hands-on learning opportunities for the formal education modules, or will it be all classroom-based learning?
I can't say right now, as I don't know exactly what Maggie and Joy are doing, but having worked with Maggie for a number of years, I can't imagine that there would not be a hands-on activity for the students to do.
Thanks. Another question is, did you already have existing relationships with those community partners, or how did you recruit them?
Oh, okay, yeah. So the background on this story is I used to work at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. I retired from there about 15 months ago. I've still wanted to contribute to make some positive contribution to making the world a better place. And so I was talking to Frederica Mosier at Maryland Sea Grant, and she suggested that I apply to this for this particular grant. When I was putting the grant together, I did not have relationships with those partnerships, the informal education partner folks. So I sent out a lot of emails to a lot of people, and some I heard back from, some were not interested, and a lot of people I did not hear back from. And so that's one thing I want to do over the next 6 months or so is, work on those partnerships I didn't hear back from or weren't so interested in, because now I sort of had a little pilot thing going on this past summer, and I might be able to convince them to work with us on this.
Awesome. Thank you, Maurice. That was really wonderful.
You're welcome.
See you soon. Okay, we can move right along to advancing equitable resources to marine debris solutions through California's ocean litter strategy. Take it away, Tanya and Teresa.
Hi.
Teresa, I can't see you, but
my camera's, if my camera's frozen, can I just turn it off? Can you hear me?
Yeah, that's fine too.
Okay,
No
it seems to have frozen, so.
No problem.
Hi, I'm Teresa, and Tanya Torres and I are with California Sea Grant, and we'll be presenting the work of this project. So next slide, please. We want to acknowledge our partners on this. So it's Tanya and I, and then co-PI Amalia Almada at USC Sea Grant. And we're also working with Caitlin Kalua of California Ocean Protection Council and Christy Kehoe of NOAA Marine Debris Program. So they're all part of this. Next slide. And we want to just roadmap for where we're headed, we just want to give a little background on equity in pollution solutions, which is fun to say too, and then a little background on the California Ocean Litter Strategy, which is a plan and a community that's in effect now. And then I'll turn it over to Tanya to talk a bit about this currently funded project. Next slide. And this group knows, and we just heard from Maurice, there's a need for equitable solutions. So historically underserved and low-income neighborhoods suffer disproportionate negative effects of pollution, and in particular, plastics pollution, whether it's through production or consumption and waste. And the organisms that serve these areas, like community-based organizations or environmental justice groups, have not had a lot of engagement so far in the state's ocean litter strategy. So meaning that conversations and actions that have gone on have had low representation and involvement from these very communities that the plan is meant to help. So there's a need to allow environmental justice and groups and BIPOC folks and to get involved in solutions and management and policy. And so that's what we're trying to do a bit of. Next slide. And okay, a quick background on what the Ocean Litter Strategy is. The Ocean Litter Strategy, so California had a version of an ocean litter prevention strategy as early as 2008, and that was led by Ocean Protection Council. Between 2016 and 2018, California Sea Grant helped this OPC, we call them, and the NOAA Marine Debris Program update that plan. And so basically it was adding more coordination, trying to track progress, and trying to actually implement some of the goals and solutions. Let me think. Oh, and then between 2018 and 2024 has been the implementation of the plan. And I'll just say, because Tanya's here, that Tanya started out as a Sea Grant Fellow, an extension fellow, split between us and NOAA Marine Debris Program. And she was primarily tasked with implementing the plan. And now she's come to work with us at Sea Grant to continue on this project. So that's been exciting. And again, this plan, this strategy is not just a plan, but Tanya will talk a bit more, I think, through the slides. But there's a whole community associated with this. Now I will turn it over to Tanya.
Thanks, Teresa. I think you forgot to say next slide. So this is the slide for lovely explanation, but you can go to the next slide.
Thank you.
So like Teresa said, the Ocean Litter Strategy is basically the state's marine debris action plan, and it's facilitated by our federal partner, the NOAA Marine Debris Program, and our state partner, the Ocean Protection Council. But truly, the ownership of the plan belongs to the wider California community, as about 50 organizations had come together to establish 6 stakeholder-driven goals, and you can see those listed here in the graphic. And I think totaling about 64 total actions amongst those goals. And this is not just a plan that lives on a shelf or in a file folder. The community has truly been coming together, making progress on these goals. And so over the past 5 years of this 6-year strategy, participant numbers have been growing, and those engaged have been meeting together regularly, sharing ideas, providing updates on actions through biannual update webinars, goal-specific work group meetings, and then we also have progress reports. Next slide. And so now I'll go into a little bit more on this current project. Next slide. And so while the Ocean Litter Strategy engagement has been high, the planning team recognized that there has been low representation and involvement from communities who have historically been marginalized or excluded from decision making and are often the most under-resourced and overburdened by pollution, such as frontline communities, community-based organizations, and even some California tribes. And so through this National Sea Grant, Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and Inflation Reduction Act funding, California Sea Grant has been awarded funding to work with the Ocean Litter Strategy planning team to work on advancing equitable resources to marine debris solutions through the California Ocean Litter Strategy. And so our first objective is to identify and engage those missing local perspectives and sectors in order to strengthen the Ocean Litter Strategy framework and coalition as a whole. And then additionally, because financial burden and capacity issues are amongst the top barriers and challenges for any sort of community engagement, our second objective is to establish an ocean litter strategy funding and equity action coalition in order to provide technical and financial support to these community efforts. And though the ocean litter strategy is a statewide plan, for this specific project, we've chosen to focus on the Los Angeles region as a pilot. And we chose Los Angeles because LA contains the majority of the state's water bodies that are declared impaired by trash. And these water bodies run through mostly low income and severely disadvantaged communities as defined by the state of California. So next slide. And so to achieve our objectives, objective 1, we plan to conduct a ocean litter strategy statewide stakeholder gap analysis. And this is where we currently are in the process. And then we want to use those results to inform the specific areas and sectors within Los Angeles that we can seek to engage more communities in. And then we would establish a community advisory group amongst the Los Angeles region, making sure to include representatives from the communities that we hope to engage. And then those folks will help us create and implement a needs assessment and an outreach plan. And then for our objective 2, we will recruit this funding and equity action coalition members from various funding entities, both in and out of the Los Angeles region, host roundtable discussions to understand these funding entities' goals, their challenges for supporting these communities, and then brainstorm creative ways to provide financial and technical support to better serve these communities that need it most. And then, of course, we'll share the findings and results with the communities that we've engaged, as well as the Ocean Litter Strategy participants. Next slide. All right, I'll go over a quick, brief, preliminary results. Next slide. From the gap analysis, we've found that we've had about 288 organizations and about 586 individuals that have engaged with the Ocean Litter Strategy since the release of the plan in 2018. And almost half of these have engaged more than once, meaning they've come back for reoccurring, webinars or work groups or progress reports. And then geographically, unsurprisingly, the top cities for engagement are Sacramento, San Francisco, San Diego, and Los Angeles. But you can see a few of those little yellow dots scattered throughout that show engagement from other areas as well. Next slide. And then here is the breakdown of organizations who have been engaged by sector. Majority are from government, federal, state, and local, environmental nonprofits, and then some industry, but most of that industry is consulting services. But like we suspected, there is a small representation from tribal organizations, environmental justice nonprofits, and place-based nonprofits. Next slide, please. And then here's just another depiction of the Ocean Litter Strategy engagement, but at the individual level, which shows pretty much the same breakdown, but it also shows that for those high represented sectors, there are not only more groups engaged, but also each group tends to involve more multiple people. And again, this indicates just this capacity issue for those lower represented groups. And within those lower, we acknowledge that these lower represented groups can hold high potential for expanding and diversifying engagement, and so we aim to find out better ways to serve and engage those groups. Next slide, please. So our next steps, excuse me, are to continue to analyze our gap analysis data with an emphasis on the LA region. Excuse me, I'm getting over a little bit of a cold. And then we're going to use that information to assemble a community advisory group and then help the advisory group create and implement the community needs assessment. Next slide. We'll now go into some anticipated outcomes.
I can jump in if you're not okay.
That might be great. Thank you, Teresa.
Now we can figure out how to unmute. Anticipated outcomes, right? It's just big scale, want to increase the meaningful engagement by community-based groups. So those that focus within communities. Like Tanya was saying, we have good representation from state and federal governments and some of the bigger environmental nonprofits, but it's these smaller groups that they can focus on education and environmental efforts and community well-being, but in particular areas, so more apt to get at environmental justice issues and bring in a greater diversity of people. We want to inform the remaining implementation of the current ocean litter strategy because it does expire, nothing magic happens, but in 2024. And so this information will inform the next version of that. And just making sure that it's supporting, resources that are well-informed and inclusive and effective. And then we want to provide scalability for other state programs who want to do the same thing. So serving as a model. Next slide. For objective 2, the outcomes are, so with this group that's the tech and financial support group, inform future funding priorities and establish creative and innovative ways to transfer power to communities. And again, this will be focused on the Los Angeles area. Increase the social and financial capital of these overburdened communities that work on marine debris in the Los Angeles area, and then establish a pathway forward through community-based marine debris coalitions elsewhere in the state, so go beyond LA. And next slide. And we'll take questions if there's time.
Thanks, all. You have a few minutes. Tanya, you're a trooper for hanging in there. Okay, first question. Will community advisory group participants from underserved communities be compensated?
Yes, that's written into the budget.
Great, thanks.
Absolutely.
And then will funding coalition participants be expected to contribute a certain amount of money to a central fund or otherwise to be distributed to the communities ID'd in objective 1?
I think that that group, we're not hitting them up for money. So that group would advise and try to help identify potential funding sources and other resources. So that's not like a group of donors or anything. And yes, the focus at first would be on the Los Angeles area, but then again, if this model worked, right, if this group works, then we could expand it elsewhere throughout the state.
Thank you. Okay, and what has been your favorite part of this project so far?
Getting started.
Yay!
I think, and Tanya can speak to, she's been working hard on the gap analysis. We have two fellows too who've been helping tremendously. So just seeing the data pulled together and come to life and seeing who's been coming and who's not and what we can do about it. So I'll let Tanya weigh in on that too. This is her.
Yeah, we haven't really gotten too far into the project yet, but just looking at the data and just seeing this plan that I've been working on since I was a fellow since 2020. Actually, yeah, looking into the data and seeing what it shows is very eye-opening to see how many people we have been reaching and those we haven't, and it answers a lot of questions. And so I feel like there's a lot of potential and a lot of ideas that are coming out of just this preliminary data analysis that we've been working on. But then also just already the partnerships that we're having, like especially working with USC Sea Grant, and then like Teresa said, we have a couple of our own state fellows that are interested in the project. So just bringing a lot of people together has been awesome.
And I'll say for this group, so California Sea Grant covers the state of California. USC Sea Grant is a little more focused on the Los Angeles and Orange County area, so the greater LA area. So they have great connections too already. It's a wonderful partnership with them.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you so much to you both. That was so great to learn more about. And Tanya, I hope you feel better. And we can move right along to our last project talk of the day. which is Community Science to Address Microplastic Pollution in Environmentally Underserved Urban Watershed Communities in New Jersey and New York. And just as a reminder to all of our speakers, we will be having breakout groups this afternoon, so please don't go anywhere. But I'm going to turn it over to Diana. Oh, Diana, we can't hear you. Let me see if I can help on my end. So you're unmuted. I still can't hear you. No. Try taking out your headphones.
Okay, how about now?
Perfect. All right, go right ahead.
Okay, all right, excellent. All right, good. Sorry, everybody, to make you wait. It's great to see you. Thanks for coming. There's so many really great projects that are funded by this opportunity, and we're really pleased to be one of them. I'm Diana Burich, the Director of Education at New Jersey Sea Grant Consortium, and we're pleased to partner with the Center for Sustainable Development at Columbia University's Earth Institute, as well as New York Sea Grant, on a community action project that proposes to engage middle and high school students in community science activities that will equip them with the scientific knowledge and skills necessary to develop solutions for mitigating plastic use, as well as establish sustainable solutions for management and stewardship of plastic waste in their communities. These students live in economically marginalized and racially diverse communities in New York City near Long Island Sound, and in New Jersey within the Hudson and Hackensack River watersheds that are currently disproportionately impacted by plastic waste. So we all know that microplastics in our waterways is a growing problem and can be increasingly found in our natural water sources. Current research has even detected microplastics in aquatic organisms, some of which are important for human consumption. So due to their proximity to wastewater discharge sites, many urban watershed communities are more affected by microplastic pollution than others. According to EPA's EJ Screen, an environmental justice screening and mapping tool, these towns are predominantly low-income communities of color that also happen to be less educated communities. So by educating youth in these communities, they'll be empowered to work towards minimizing environmental harm for their neighbors far and wide. So this project will build upon existing efforts by New Jersey Sea Grant Consortium and New York Sea Grant to improve environmental literacy, spread plastic awareness, and create curricular resources for students. Through Columbia University's Eco Ambassadors program, the next generation of decision makers will begin educating their own communities about local environmental issues and start taking steps to solving these issues with community action. Participating middle and high school students will learn water sampling and analysis methods from top Columbia University researchers and translate their findings to story maps that will be used to transform geographic information into interactive tools for community engagement. So I'm going to turn this over to Radhika and Hayan, both of Columbia University, and they're going to give you a little bit more background information about the project, what our plans are, and what we hope to accomplish. So next slide, please.
Thank you, Diana.
Thank you, Radhika.
So I'm Radhika Iyengar. I'm at the Center for Sustainable Development, the Director of Education. Thanks to Diana, we have this wonderful, project that the Sea Grant is funding, and the inception of the Eco Ambassador program was a couple of years back. I would say around 4 to 5 years back. It started with Hain and I, my colleague and I, started doing these small workshops in a community library in New Jersey, in my town, in Milburn. And we saw this gap between active research as well as citizen science related work, as well as there was a lot of youth movement and leadership, but there was this lacking of science training and active science component that we tried to fill in through our different workshops. So the objective of the Eco Ambassador program was is to actually used science training and help with youth leadership so that they have the skills to go forward researching their own topic of interest on a topic that is related to sustainable development. So that was our goal, which we started around 4 years back, and since then many youth in New Jersey, in New York, have become eco ambassadors and are trained in using various different tools. So we'll go over the tools as a part of the objectives in the next slide, please. So for this particular project, it is built upon the previous work that we have done through the Eco Ambassadors project. In every discussion that we had, plastic came about, and we are very good. The program was all about listening to what students really want to learn about, and specifically plastic topic came very often. So our program, which was the Eco Ambassadors program, started focusing on how do we work on plastic particularly. And then we had this wonderful opportunity with Diana to work on a proposal which was very gratefully accepted by the Sea Grant, and started working on specifically to mobilize knowledge around plastic issues, especially microplastic. So our goal is to support New Jersey, New York communities impacted by environmental justice to build skills for raising awareness of the challenges of microplastic in the water supplies. The tools that we have come up with over a couple of years has been how to conduct research, how to go about forming your research questions, what are some of the assumptions, how do you use tools that are have geospatial mapping capabilities. So we partner with the other groups to see how we can build in this geospatial mapping ability with students. Storytelling, how do you narrate a specific story and how do you communicate and be a leader in promoting the science-based knowledge in your own community. So that's one of the main objectives and the skills that we are hoping students will be able to get. And if we talk about these 21st century learning skills, these are transferable to other subjects and other topics as well, be it social science, be it English, or other topics. And finally, the students, what is the product that they are able to make? They are able to make these story maps, which are really helpful to connect the global goals, which is the sustainable development goals, to a local problem, which is this microplastic issue that we are dealing with, specifically on pollution within their own communities. And then they see the justice component when they map all these things geospatially. So it creates these youth-led story maps which are helpful to narrate what the students and what the eco ambassadors are feeling and how they bring all these different components and these tools together to promote again citizen science led work in the communities and across different subjects. And the second goal is to support these communities for mobilizing for change. So it's basically equipping these the students and the communities. The students usually share these story maps with other groups. We partner with UNESCO, and these story maps will go to this COP28 as well as our other partners get to see these story maps that are coming from the students. And we are hoping that with Diana's help and with New York Sea Grant's help, we'll be able to make lesson plans out of these story maps. And so it is kind of making lesson plans that the students have created and validating them and using it in the schools and in other places. So those are our objectives for this particular study. I'll hand it over to my colleague Henshin, who will go over all the timelines and the details.
Thank you, Radhika, and thank you, Diana. Hi, everyone. As my colleagues mentioned, my name is Hei-Yin Shin. So I'll quickly go over the few different components of the project to help us meet our project goals. So the first component, field work and sample collection. So this is to really get the students out there in the field to take the water samples and help them to become aware of their own local waterways and potential sources of pollution in and near their communities. And then the lab work, which is done with a series of workshops, is where the students conduct the processing and analysis of microplastics in the water, the soil, and the biological samples that they collected during the field work. And the students are provided with protocols for sample collection, processing, and analyses using microscope imaging for the samples. And this goes with, this is not necessarily going in order, but you'll see the little block with training and research protocol. So prior to commencement of the field study, students are also trained in clean sample collection techniques and sample handling methods, safe lab techniques for filtering and digestion of raw samples, the staining of them and the storage of them. And students are also trained in cataloging all microscopic image files, which later become very helpful when we're trying to get the different images out there, the different results out there through the storytelling and sharing the results of what they have found. So all this leads to the community education outreach and the story maps. And this is, as Radhika mentioned and Diana mentioned, this really is a component we find to be as important as the science work that is being done by students. And we have really tried to emphasize in our program the students' ability and their competency to be able to communicate the results as much as they have just known how to learn the handling of it and the training of the handling of the different samples. So how do you communicate these results to a wider audience? So we encourage and train students in public speaking, effective communication. With our prior sessions with the Eco Ambassador Program, we have invited different climate and environment journalists to come speak with the students to provide tips and best practices and how do you tell compelling stories to communicate your data and communicate with a local lens. So with some concrete tools for storytelling, you've heard us mention this a few times, the story maps, which is a geo-referenced data tool. And the story maps platform, it uses maps and it has an extensive data set that students can choose from to incorporate into the different layers of their map. And it becomes an interactive tool where students can also add their findings. And we encourage youth to really write their story, not just as a science researcher, this is what we found, but how do you tell that story once again with a local lens so that the viewers reading these stories can look at it and see the scientific results, but also understand how it can be applicable or relevant to different communities as well. And then finally, the lesson content and development piece. This is the localization of training and educational content so that we can take a local issue and enable it to be replicated and be relevant in other settings, as I mentioned. So based on the identification of schools and community organizations, we plan to turn our training content and curriculum resources to be adapted for very specific community contexts with feedback from participating educators and youth who have been part of the process and who are directly from that community. And this is also mapped onto the curriculum standards. We have done this prior with the New Jersey curriculum, the climate learning standards for K to 12 education, and we plan to continue doing that. And so our aim is to build rich content about local waterways and reference water quality data like using Open Sewer Atlas, New York Sea Grant's list of EJ mapping tool that Diana mentioned, EPA's How's My Waterway tools, various different tools that can come together for this component. And so let me see if there's, next slide, please. So on to the recruitment. So far we have done our recruitment through our existing, of course, our prior networks and the work we have done through Columbia University and Eco Ambassador networks, different newsletters, and also targeted outreach through the New Jersey Sea Grant to various school districts. And then next slide, please. And then, so this is an evolving timeline, but this is just a quick view on the flow of the project deliverables. And I will actually stop there for any questions. And Diana, Radhika, if you have anything else to add. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, looks like we have time for one question, and it is, was there a consideration of incorporating macro floating debris? Was the focus on microplastics driven by community interest or other factors?
Maybe I can jump in, and Diana, please feel free to add. Microplastic seemed to be, we had done a couple of workshops with our students, with our eco ambassadors previously in previous years, and we had invited Joachim Goes and Bejan and other scientists from Columbia University, and I think that helped the students to get more in depth into microplastic research. So again, this was very driven by our workshops and very much what the students were interested in, and so we tended towards writing more about the microplastics, since we knew that our scientists were able to bring in the science component, and we along with the Diana were able to bring in the education component for microplastics specifically. Diana, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think with regards to working on microplastics, I know here at New Jersey Sea Grant, we're focusing a lot of our education efforts on microplastics due to the proximity to the water where a lot of our programs take place. But I think also with regards to students, it's exciting for them to be able to use authentic scientific protocol and equipment, lab equipment, to investigate something that they may not readily be able to see. So I think that's part of the draw for kids having an interest in microplastics and microfibers as well.
Great. Thank you so much. That was such a great way to round out our day of talks. And so I just want to remind everyone that we have more symposium talks starting next Wednesday at 2 p.m. And speakers, we have breakout sessions from 4 to 5 p.m. today. So we have about a half-hour break, and then I'll see you all in those breakout sessions. If you need a resend of the calendar invite, please email me. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming and for speaking. This has been a great first week, and we'll see you all next Wednesday.